It's another episode, gentlemen. Welcome. Hello, Ken.
Morning.
We have a special guest sitting across the table. Either that or Brad has transformed into someone else.
It's quite the transformation.
Into a, I don't know, would it be better looking person?
Absolutely.
Okay.
He sounds smarter now.
Okay. Yeah, he's British, so now.
Brad is in Detroit, I think, right?
Yeah, let's go with that.
Okay.
He's from Detroit,
He's
so
in
he goes there a
Michigan.
lot.
He's in Michigan. Actually, sitting across the table from me is Mr. Bob Strachan. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. Good morning.
Yeah. Bob is Ken's partner in crime here at Metacake. Mm-hmm. So we have
Business partner.
Yeah, exactly.
just to be clear.
We have actually had to clarify that several times
Yeah,
over the years.
Say partner, it's business partner.
Yeah. Okay. This is Ken's business partner at Metacake.
I'm just joking.
Bob Strachan, and we have talked and mentioned Bob many times on the podcast over our 43 episodes or
Most
whatever
of the time,
it is.
Most of the time, they're good conversations.
Yes, always good.
It's actually the main reason I listen to the podcast.
Wait for your name to come
Yeah,
up.
just to hear what you guys are saying about me.
That's
we
true.
transcribed this. We could probably just give
That
you
would be
a-
helpful.
Yeah.
Keyword search.
Keyword search. No, seriously, Bob, welcome. It's good to have you. It's long overdue. We've mentioned several times. Let's get Bob on. So he's filling in for Brad, but also we want to talk about your partnership today. I think would be really helpful. We've talked a lot about that.
Yeah.
I know Brad's talked about having no partner, myself having no partner when I was running an agency, and working with agencies that have multiple partners, and obviously you two. So I think we could dive a little bit into that, the pros and cons, but
Yeah, I don't know how deep we've gone in the past into that, but I think that's a good topic today. Mm-hmm. Dig into the pros and cons of partnerships. I think there are pros and cons. I don't think there's one best, one's necessarily all pros,
sounds like you want to go into the cons today with Bob.
We should go there.
Yeah, we should.
Before we start, Bob, I'd love for you to tell people listening, if you don't mind, a little bit about your background and how you ended up here in Nashville with Ken, and but leading up to that, what's your life history?
Sure. Try and keep it concise. So I actually was born and grew up in Hong Kong, which was a British colony until 1997. My dad
Explains some of the British accent.
Do I still have a British accent?
I know you tell me your family always tells you that you've got a Southern accent because we live here in Nashville.
Yeah, I think my parents think I'm from Mississippi.
But I would say most people, when they meet you, usually they're thinking that you have some sort of a British tilt to your accent.
I feel like I get told that less and less. So I feel like over the last few years, and fewer people mention it.
It's probably getting watered down.
Yeah.
You need to jack it up a little bit because you sound smarter.
You can turn it
than
on,
British.
though, can't you?
If I need to.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's good
Why is it that we as Americans think that sounds so intelligent? Is that were we that stupid, or what is it?
I know. It's so cliche to say, and I was joking when I said it, but I do think, I think it's not just British accents, right?
I think it's mainly British accents.
Well, Australian accents have I guess they're...
Yeah, but if someone says something to you in an Australian accent, I think you've got more questions about it.
about the legitimacy of it.
Yeah, exactly.
We have a lot of Australian friends, just so everyone knows.
I think what I'm hearing is it depends on where you're from originally, whether you think the accent is intelligent or not.
Probably. And
Cultural bias.
In the U.S., a British accent means, wow, I should listen to this person.
Okay, we'll wrap that.
Okay, Mr. Intelligent, continue.
Certainly. So I actually grew up in, in Hong Kong. Really, looking back, just a great place to have grown up and have been a kid. It was a very safe city and easy to get around, lots of public transport. And so even, kind of at a young age had a lot of freedom to kind of get around the city where we lived. We actually had a little bit of space too. So it was kind of fun growing up there. Went to high school through that. I went to college in England. I went to Sheffield University. It's one of the three great universities of England: Oxford, Cambridge, and Sheffield.
You're a soccer fan.
That's a joke, by the way.
Okay.
But you say it in a British accent, nobody knows.
Yeah.
We just look at you and shake our head. Yeah. Oh, really? That's amazing.
It's like Ivy League. So yeah, joke. But and then after I graduated, I was pretty excited to get back to Hong Kong because obviously Hong Kong's a thriving business center, international center for business in Asia. It's a really great place to be, and just kind of started honestly really at the bottom. I got a job at a Boston-based consulting company called the Monitor Group, and I initially started out doing literally PowerPoint had just come out, so we're talking like, or maybe had been out for a few years. We're talking like 95, I think 96.
I mean, they didn't have Google Slides?
No Google Slides.
Oh.
And so I did a lot of PowerPoint and I did a lot of research for this consulting group. And I think
What did you get your degree in?
I got a dual honors in molecular biology and biotechnology.
Okay, so PowerPoint.
And then went straight to PowerPoint. Actually, I had explored doing a PhD, but I got some really good advice from a PhD student who was a friend of mine, and he was like, look, if you're going to do a PhD, you need to like either absolutely love the subject or have a very particular job in mind that needs a PhD. Otherwise, don't do it because it's for like 4 more years of being a student and it's tough. And I realized at that point, I was like, I like the science, but I was like, I want to go do something.
So in England, can you go directly from a bachelor's to a PhD?
You can, yeah.
Okay.
And our bachelors, we're so smart over there. Our bachelors only take 3 years. So,
Right. Yes.
yeah.
So your PhD is like our master's.
Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically. So anyway, I joined this consulting group, and it really, I think for me, I would say I lucked into a company and a industry consulting that I just found absolutely fascinating and loved. And a couple of the things that I really enjoyed about it, one was every few months we'd be working for a different client in a different country, in a different industry, which was a little bit crazy. But I just loved that drinking from the fire hose, learning fast and learning new things and meeting new people. After, I think, about a year and a half of doing the sort of junior research assistant PowerPoint dude job, I talked to the guy who ran the region about, becoming a consultant. And at that point, they were only recruiting from Ivy League schools in the U.S., literally 3 or 4 schools. It was a small company, and they just recruited sort of that kind of person. And there wasn't really a path to go from where I was to being a consultant. But I guess they just saw something in me, and they kind of gave me a few opportunities to do that, and I was able to kind of step into that role. And then they sent me to Boston for the 2-week new consultant orientation. And after that, I was did consulting for a year or so, then led teams pretty much through until the end of the 90s. And I think that just that, like I mentioned, that exposure to, we worked with Coca-Cola, we worked with Alcan, we worked with British Gas, we worked with a whole bunch of U.S. and large European multinationals in Asia who had business problems. Things were going on, and we had to go in and figure out what the issue was and try and solve that within a short space of time. So just a real baptism of fire, I think, really into the world of business. And through the late 90s, obviously the internet was becoming a thing. And a couple of our projects towards the end had a technology component to them. And I think that then just took it to another level for me, was like looking at how technology could really serve business. And I think that just laid the foundation for my life in wanting to kind of be that bridge a little bit, because I could see how highly technical people could get very frustrated with business and or marketing people. And I think I saw that I had an ability, and I think maybe part of it could be just growing up in a place like Hong Kong. You sort of, sometimes they call you like a third culture kid, because I was a foreigner in a place like Hong Kong. It's sort of a very odd cultural dynamic to grow up there. And I think I had some good communication skills maybe as a basis, but then also learned that, to really, pay attention and listen to what people were saying and try and, say things back to them. I think just growing up in that kind of culture, you kind of learn to communicate really well. And so I think I just found that I had a natural gift for sitting down with business people to hear what they're trying to do, sitting down with, maybe technology or people to hear what they could do and what was possible, and then helping to kind of bridge that gap.
That's great. I know I also grew up overseas some of my life. Do you feel like that gives you? I feel like it gives me an advantage many times because I had the benefit of seeing things from a very different worldview and perspective and culture, which still informs the way that I see the world today. Would you feel the same way about?
Yeah, I agree. I think that maybe at its foundation, I think it gives you I'll just say like humility, I think, and a respect, because I think you kind of come in with a sort of open book of, okay, this is a new situation for me, and I've been in these situations many, many, many times before, and I know that I don't know what's going on here, so I need to just have wide eyes and pay attention and listen. And I think that helps you when you step into a new situation or a new culture. Or like I moved down here to Tennessee, you're just like, okay, what's going on down here? What are the people like? What are, just, without really bringing any maybe preconceptions, it's more like watch and listen and learn before you maybe form your opinion.
That's great. So it was love that brought you to the States.
It was. I met a beautiful, wonderful young woman in Hong Kong, Amy Stevens, and we got married in Hong Kong, and her family's from Colorado. Her family actually had been out in Hong Kong. They had started an orphanage in Hong Kong, and they were working with unwed moms, young ladies who had got pregnant. And in that culture, I would say probably Hong Kong culture, at least on the sort of maybe on the more Chinese side, was definitely 20, 30 years behind probably Western culture. And so if you got pregnant at 16 or 17, it was, a major issue. Many young girls got thrown out. And so that's kind of what started what they did. They started an organization called Mother's Choice in Hong Kong. And then that led to helping serve the babies that were born and getting them placed in local families. And then some of the special needs kids getting placed overseas. So that was the ministry. They worked there for many years. And so that's where I met Amy. I was volunteering at Mother's Choice, so I met her there, and then we ended up dating and getting married in Hong Kong.
That's great. That's great. And then you came to the States, around early 2000s? Or?
Yeah, early 2000s we moved to the States, and I went from Hong Kong to rural western Colorado.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was that a culture shock for you?
I'm sure it was, but I loved it. I was ready, I think, for something different. And I just learning, like, the funny thing is, like, I was like, I want to learn how to snowboard. And so that first winter we were there, I basically spent 5 days on my butt, falling over. I think they actually gave me a butt pad for Christmas. Like, I got so badly beat up. I'm definitely not a natural at snowboarding or skiing, but
snowboarding's tough.
Snowboarding was really fun. It was one of the hardest things I think I've ever done. I loved the hiking and climbing the mountains. I had done some fishing as a kid, so fishing was fun. And then hunting was really, that was kind of exciting for me to get into. I remember I went to do my hunter safety class, and it was like me and like all these like 12-year-old boys. I think they were like, "Why is this like 35-year-old guy getting into hunting?"
With a weird accent.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, Colorado was really fun. And then in this tiny little town, as fate would have it, I met a New York Times bestselling author who was out there trying to find a sort of creative writing space. And he was well known in the
Did he have a cabin in the woods?
He had a mansion on the edge of town. No, not
he had a mansion in the woods.
I wouldn't say a mansion, but he had a large house on the edge of town. And I got to know him, and then I started helping him with some of his stuff part-time, and then that turned into like a full-time kind of marketing and media role for him.
That's great. That's great. So fast forward, you make it to Nashville, you worked with me for a while. I know Ken, you came around the early 2000s as well?
2007 we came here.
I actually think we both moved to Tennessee within the same few months.
Yeah. So you guys, when did you guys start Metacake?
2011.
Okay. So it's been
9 years now.
That's awesome. Good ride.
About 9 years. Yeah, it's been we've talked about a lot of the history, or some of the stories and the learnings and all that kind of stuff on the podcast a lot, right? So it has been a really good ride, and I think it's been a learning experience, as any business is. I've spent most of my life in some sort of a business, like either trying to start one, running one, consulting with them, and I, Metacake is it's matured me personally, I know, and Bob has a lot to do with that, I think. And it's really interesting. We see our business as not only what we do, but why we do it. We talk about that a lot. We genuinely believe in that. We believe I'm personally here for a higher purpose, and we have a greater purpose in this world, and we use our business. We try and steward everything we have well inside of that, and try and help companies not only do what they do better, but be as good as they can be, and where we can help create positive influence there, we do that. And I would say over the last 9 years, it's been an evolution of what we do, how we do it, why, all those kind of things. And for instance, we weren't specialized in e-commerce at the beginning, and that's kind of a practical business thing. But I talk about that a lot, how that specialization is an important thing. And so I think in probably 2016-ish is when we started to really specialize in e-commerce from an outside point of view. But yeah, no, it's we don't have to talk to. We can get into that kind of stuff if we want to.
I want to talk.
I don't want to talk about partnerships, though, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about that a little bit. Like when you guys decided to join forces and start Metacake, what was your what was your expectations? What was the dance of that? And I mean that obviously in a metaphorical sense of like what were you both thinking? Like, I'm excited. Let's join forces and do this, or was it more of, I've got my thing, you've got your thing. Let's just kind of see what happens. Mm-hmm. Was it an intentional thing that you both said, let's partner together and build this thing?
Yeah. Bobby, welcome to jump in there. I mean, I have some thoughts on it. But
yeah. I think those are all the things you touched on, Bob, were things that I think we thought about and talked about a little bit. So I had my own little consulting thing I was doing, and I had some clients, and I think things were going well, but in terms of a team, I was just sort of contracting things out to people. And Ken was someone that I had done work with in the past and really respected. He was one of those people who did what he said. His work quality was really high. I really liked him. And so I think in that context, we started to do more things together in terms of projects. And I'd always value, what he'd bring to the table in terms of like, hey, maybe there's some better ways to do this type of thing. And he was always very straight up with me, and I always respected that. And so I think the more we started to work together, we had a conversation around, hey, what would it look like if we were, to kind of bring both of our businesses together maybe and work together. It seems like there's a good fit in terms of skill set and an opportunity, and then kind of really scale that. So I think from my point of view, initially, I probably thought about it for a very short space of time. Went, yeah, it sounds like a great idea. We should do that. Ken, from what I remember, and you can jump in here at any moment. I think Ken was like, what if we, I think your expression that I've used to this day is wade in together.
Yeah, I agree. We took it. We started slow, and I have some thoughts on this, and especially anyone listening who I know. I talk to a lot of people, especially in the agency world, that have the debate that we've had before of, it's only me, and should I have a partner, and how do I bring a partner in, and what does that look like? Got some thoughts there, but I think wading in is smart because. It's a decision that you really can't undo very easily, right? Similar to marriage, I would say, in that, you blend a lot of things. Mm-hmm. There's agreements, there's legal stuff, there's obviously relationships and friendships and those kind of things, where undoing that takes not only a lot of work, but probably burns some bridges as well. And so I think it's a decision that you should think carefully about.
And I would just say, pulling partnerships apart, all those things are true, but it's also a huge emotional burn.
Right. Relationships involved.
It will consume you.
And it's hard not to get contentious in it too.
Right, exactly. And that's stressful.
Oh, it's just horrible. I mean, we all have limited amount of time on this planet. Why spend it, fighting or being angry or being anxious and all those kind of things, right? So if you can avoid it. So I just think it's wise to wade into. So what we did, and which we've done with other businesses, as we've invested in other businesses over the last 9 years or so, and more. We've started other businesses. We've partnered with other companies in joint ventures and those kind of things. And so we've taken this approach pretty much with all that. I think it's been well. Is we just waded in. We sort of started by kind of acting like business partners. And we sort of set a period of time in place where it said, hey, let's try this out as if it were. And so we would bring in things together, split things. We'd have sort of agreements on each of those things that we were doing, whether they were projects or initiatives or whatever, on, hey, with this thing, here we'll split it 50-50, if it ends and, once it's over, it doesn't go beyond that unless we decide it does. So we just waded in with the intention of, hey, if this works out, we'll partner together and actually bring the two companies together, and anything that we're doing, teams and all that kind of stuff, bring it together. So that was the wisest approach. It kind of allowed, and I would suggest that anyone considering it do it that way. You sort of test it out.
There's
in a way that
a technical term for that.
What's that?
Dating.
Yeah. Okay, you date.
Minimum viable product.
Yeah, right. Technical term. Yeah, I think that's a smart thing.
And I think just a couple thoughts on my side. One is, I think for me coming into it, probably the biggest thing that I had to wrestle with was, I think from my perception, so I don't know if this is true, but from my perception, I felt like I had quite a lot of clients, and I was like, I think I have more than Ken does. I think I'm bringing more money to the table.
Bull crap. I'm just kidding.
No,
that's totally true. That's totally true.
But I think I was like, so I had to go through the process of, do I think by partnering with Ken and sharing this that there's more, right? Like,
do you think his value is worth that much? Is that what you're saying?
Basically, or do I think there's a bigger opportunity here? Like, am I willing to forego short-term, maybe some of the revenue I've got short-term, which wasn't much really in the grand scheme of things, but at the time, but am I willing to share that with Ken to build something, to invest in something? And I think so that was just a process I had to go through.
What I see here, and I think the reason it has worked so well for both of you is I feel like you're more of a risk seeker to some degree. Yeah, willing.
Probably.
You might be a little more risk averse in some ways. I think it's that balance of both is what seems to me that might work. Yes or no?
I think there's I think that is
flip-flop,
true.
Yeah,
but there's a weird dichotomy with both of us that Ken's, I don't even know how to put words to it, but I think I'm maybe a bit more impulsive. Like if I'll make a decision maybe faster, and then Ken might sometimes be like, well, hold on, let's just think about that for a minute.
So maybe I'm.
But I do think Ken is more. I don't know if entrepreneurial is the right word, but I think Ken is better at looking down the road and saying, like, we should bet all on black. Like, we should all go in all in on that. Whereas I might be like, you know what I mean? So I think there is a combination of things there. That's good.
Yeah, I would say this. This goes to a couple things. I know we talked about the personality profiles, disc profiles, and that's you're good. Sorry, Bob, you were on my headphone cord, and it was messing me up. We got to get longer cords here.
You need to buy more expensive headphones.
I think personality I think when we talk about, maybe if we want to talk 5 minutes about personality profiles, and I think how they pertain to partnerships, I think that's an interesting discussion, and one that I think would help people. But I think that plays into it. But yeah, I would say, my personality is, I think, I'm not saying, I won't say what Bob is or isn't, but I think I am vision oriented, which tends to be categorized as entrepreneurial. And I have had that history in my past, right? So I start businesses, I try things. I love getting up and being like, hey, today could be the day that we take over the world. That is exciting to me. And it's a lot of what's driven me in business, up until, till now. Excuse me. But I also have, I'm half Italian, half German, so I've got this heavy analytical side of me that I actually have to keep in check, because Germans are analytical, in case you didn't know. And so I have, I kind of struggled with that balance in the past, but I generally am able to keep it in check with, outside input and trying to be, self-aware and have the right amount of like people speaking into like my life. But, I do have this analytical side of me, and I think I'm not great at a lot of things, and that's where Bob comes in, especially in business. I think one thing I'm decent at is being able to read a situation and have enough analysis to say, I think if these things happen, this is a bad thing, and I think if these things happen, it's a good thing. So let's go this way. I think that's been one of my my giftings. I'll use that word lightly. But I have a reasonable way, I think, of doing that. And so, when it came to looking at this, it's, the other thing I had was I have been in a lot of business partnerships. And the good thing is I was really young, and so it didn't really matter if they worked or didn't work. So I would
learn that early.
I work, when I went to high school, the internet was just, starting to like really come out. And so I started companies there with people in my classes and those kind of things. Like, and while those are, and some of them had really interesting success, but like while those type of partnerships weren't like, official legal things, they actually kind of helped me learn in a safe environment, like what is good and what's not. I had other partnerships that kind of led me to Nashville. And I learned from those because none of them ended horribly or badly, or anything like that. But I definitely think there were personality issues that got in the way.
Right.
There were challenges with it. They didn't end in a lot of them didn't end great, where it wasn't like stressful to kind of end the thing. So learning from that, I was like, hey, look, we need to, and I think that anyone who matures in their business, as you mature in your professional life and your business, I think you have greater risk. And you do probably have to figure out how do you mitigate as much of that risk as possible. And so I do think this idea of wading in, I think we've even seen this work with big organizations. You test it out, and if that, and you figure out what you're going to measure it by, and then if that works, then you kind of do all the legal stuff. But that's where that kind of came from, is this idea of wading in is like, hey, we don't have to like just jump into this. We try it out. If it works, we feel like it's still good, then, we'll make it official. And
I think just to add briefly to that, when you're wading in, I think it's important. I don't know that I really did this intentionally. Ken may have, but I think what you just said there, Ken, at the end is really important, is thinking about what are the assumptions you're testing as you wade in, right? What are the questions you want answered, if possible, in the next 6 months, 12 months, whatever that looks like? The things you're testing that could this partnership survive have long-term value?
That's good. Bob, what would you, what's the top one or two things that you advise if someone's listening to this and they're like, I've got someone that I want to we're talking about going into business, or I've been doing this so long, I need to get a partner. What are some just practical advice you'd give someone like that? And specifically what you've learned, I want to hear.
Yeah. I feel like I do get asked about this because I hear a lot, and I don't know if it's true, but I hear a lot that the type of partnership that Ken and I have is rare. And I know it's definitely something I really value, but hearing that from other people makes me value it even more. So I have spent some time thinking about it. And I think a couple things is, we talked a little bit before about the metaphor of marriage, right? And using that as a point of reference to think about this, I think is helpful. And I think, often we get into partnerships, I would say most of the time, because we respect the talents of the person. And so I think that can take you a certain distance. You're like, well, this person's really talented. I can do this. They can do this. Let's partner up. And that can work for a little while. But I think what I have learned is, and I think that's probably true of us when we got in, when we started working together.
The talents were complementary.
Yeah, the talents were complementary, and I think I really respected Ken.
And Ken was in all of your talents.
And he was in...
Yeah, no, truthfully so at the time. Yeah, absolutely.
But I think what happens in partnerships that succeed is it becomes more of a respect for the person. And so I think that the reasoning that that's helpful is I think going into it, I'm not exactly sure how to frame it or how to put words to it, but you almost want to look at that person and say, is this someone that I can see myself, being in business with? And let's be real, if you're in a business, a full-time business with somebody, you're doing life with that person,
yes.
right? So again, coming back to the overlap with marriage, but I probably spend more time, well, maybe not since Corona, but prior to Corona, significantly more time in a year with Ken than I do with my wife, I would say. It seems weird to say that out loud, but I'm pretty sure that's true.
I mean, most people in business, that's the case. That's
right.
why,
exactly.
I think
you're here at least
some of this work
8 hours
home.
a day, right? So,
yeah. So I think thinking through and asking that question, like, is this person someone that I can do life with? That might be a weird way to put it, but someone that I can see being in business with over the long term, beyond just maybe their capabilities and skills and what they bring to the table.
Yeah, it's a smart thing, I think, for sure.
Do you think that's something that, it's a great point, and I agree 100%, is really getting to know the person, not, the metaphor of marriage, like your wife or your significant other could be beautiful or good looking and, have a great funny personality and a sense of humor, but all those things just take you so far, right? You realize after a short amount of time, whatever it may be, that's not what holds you together. It's not how the other person looks or how funny they are. It's really what kind of person they are inside and what you connect with and what does it mean when you're going through difficult times. And you begin to love the soul of that person, right? So in a way, I'm just curious, like, how do you know, going into it? Is it would your advice be probably look for someone that you've gotten to know and seen them, in different aspects of life? Don't just jump in with someone because they have a lot of clients or they're really good at sales. What's the practical application of that?
I definitely think it's challenging because often you do have to work through, I would say, I'll call them a facade or a mask. And I think all of us do it. I know I do it too. We put on a front, and I think it takes time. And I think, Bob, your point of seeing people in different contexts, like what are they like with their family? What are they like with their friends? How do they treat people in a restaurant? All of those things I think can feed into it. And I'm not sure that there's any, silver bullet on how you can get all those questions answered. So I think back to Ken's point about waiting in, I think if that's on your list of like, I really want to dig into this person and try to understand them as much as I can and see them in different contexts to try to see how they're, there's a saying that I really like, which is don't let your gifts take you where your character can't keep you. Because I think our gifts can get us into a lot of places where if our character is not up to the same level, that we'll have a fall, right? And those are often the ways we learn in life. But I think if you're able to observe somebody with that kind of frame of mind that you really want to, dig into their character and just assess them as best you can, I do think that's a really important thing to do.
Somebody told me several years ago, it's something that's always stuck with me. It's how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good rule of thumb. First, with ourselves.
I thought you told me that was your saying. Did you get that from Bob?
No. Yeah, he said it. Sorry.
I'm just kidding.
I stole that one.
I always try to remember that. First of all, for myself, if I'm cutting corners and brushing my teeth in the morning, I'm like, oh, this doesn't matter. I'll just kind of like not even put toothpaste on and just put the water on.
I knew something was going on there.
Then there's a good chance I'm cutting corners and not like being thorough in other areas of my life. And that's not a shame thing I'm trying to say. I'm just saying that's, if somebody is, like you said, if somebody's in a restaurant and someone is really rude and arrogant to the waiter of how they treat the person that's trying to serve them and earn a living by doing that, there's a good chance that that person is doing that in many other areas of their life. And so being able to see those things, first in ourselves, but then, in a potential partner.
One other thought I wanted to share is, I think Ken, I've heard you say this, or frame it this way, which I really like, which is partnerships work when interests are aligned. And so I think maybe we can dig into that a little bit, because I think going into a partnership, I think that's 100% true. And I think that can sustain a partnership for a period of time. So I think maybe there's two other pieces to that are important. Maybe we can talk about. One is, I think you also have to have an awareness, like in a marriage, that there may be times when you're going to have to put the other person's interests above your own. And I think that can, again, if you are willing to do that, that can sustain a partnership, but that has to be healthy as well, because there can be an unhealthy partnership where you're just letting the other person, you're serving the other person's interests. Inside, you're dying a little bit every time, if that goes on. And so I do think there's the sort of, again, there's the business interests, right? Are they aligned? That's important. I think ultimately, probably deeper philosophical purpose interest has to be pretty close or aligned. Otherwise, you're going to, have challenges. But I also think you do need to go into a partnership with the mindset that there may be times that you're going to have to serve the other person. You're going to have to let their interest supersede your own. And again, I don't know, maybe we can talk about how you feel about that, Ken, or what your thoughts are.
No, I mean, I think that's good. I think there are three, because I actually have, I think this is important to talk through, because I think there's another side of that coin. So I love what you just said. And I would say there are three things that I think should be aligned. It's interest, purpose, and character. I think if those things are aligned, you've got the potential for a good partnership. And by the way, this is, hey, if you've got that lady in your life out there, or that guy, this is probably good advice on that front too. If you're thinking about pulling the trigger, interest,
Ken Ott, relationship
purpose,
counselor,
character. Make a note. There's some extra hashtags.
Yeah, exactly.
Character.
New
This
listeners.
is right. Dating advice, marriage advice. This is not, but that I think it works for a lot of relationships, I think is the point. Interest, purpose, and character. I think the other side of that coin is, I don't think you can be the same person.
Right.
And so that's why I think it's important to realize what should be the same and what should be aligned and what actually should be different. Because I do think skills need to be, not different is the word, or complementary. And I also think that some elements of personality and what you like also need to be complementary, right? Because ultimately, if you're trying to do that, it's like any other team. But I used to play basketball growing up. Everyone can't shoot threes. Everyone can't rebound. There's got to be people that do the different things, and they have to love that. They have to love their position there. They have to believe in the team. And so, if everyone's trying to, if the skills are all the same and the personalities are all the same, which may mean your egos kind of get in the way too, I think those become an issue. And I would say it is rare. It's hard to do that. I mean, we all know what it's like, especially with ego in the mix, inside of business. And so, I've got some thoughts on that, but I do think there's things that should be the same and then things that should be different. And, I don't think you can have a long-term kind of critical partnership in your life, business partnership that's, where you differ on character, you differ on purpose,
right,
or you differ on
interest.
Yeah, that usually doesn't work. What do you guys feel about specifically the idea of conflict? As I sit here and think about a good marriage, a good partnership, any type of partnership between two human beings, I think there's a great need to be willing to have healthy conflict. When you can't push back on one another, that's unhealthy. When one is very contentious, that's unhealthy. So what is the balance in your relationship that works well, and not to get into dirty laundry, but maybe, what does it look like when you disagree? Is that something that you've had to really work on through the past 9 years, or is that something that just works really well with each other?
I think that, I grew up in a place where conflict is not as, it's just somewhat common.
I've had dinner at Ken's house with his brothers and their
I've
family.
got three brothers.
It never stops.
And a even bigger family beyond that. And
You come ready to dinner.
we used to say, like,
My wife's Italian. I get it.
Yeah, we have a few. There's a handful of girls in my whole extended family, cousins and those kind of things. I don't have any sisters. But if they ever brought anyone, if they were dating anyone, and they would not bring them by any family event unless they were
like the scene in My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Yeah, unless that person was the one, and
I'll kill ya.
We were really nice to them, but it was sort of like a it's a baptism by fire kind of thing, and anyway, yeah. So I'm
not going to let them in the family easily.
No, come on. I'm just kidding. I'm a little bit more comfortable with that, and then on the other hand, Bob's British, so he's very uncomfortable with that.
Extremely.
Really?
Not now, but I think again, back to the personality test and those type of things. I'm a peacemaker on the
Enneagram 9.
Enneagram, yeah.
Enneagram, and I'm a high SI on the disc, so stability and harmony are what give me energy, and so conflict is challenging. Now, I think that's something I've just had to work on over the years, with both in my marriage, my actual marriage, and my marriage to Ken.
What's funny is one time Bob came in, this is kind of like exemplified it for me. This is years and years ago, but he was clearly down, and Bob kind of wears his emotions on his sleeve. So I'm like, what's going on? And I think he said something like, I just had a fight with my mom. And it was like, I destroyed your day. I'm like, I think I fight with my mom 3 times a day for the last 35 years. It doesn't give me energy, but it's like, what's the problem?
Yeah. Well,
I do think, I know every partnership's unique. I think in ours, probably, I don't know, Ken, what your perspective on it would be, but I would say more often than not, there's a pretty quick, I wouldn't say compromise, but there's alignment, pretty quick alignment. We'll talk it out, and there's quick alignment. And occasionally, if I'm like, no, I'm not, this, I don't agree with this, or I've got a different point of view, then it might kind of burn out over a few days. But I would say those times have been pretty rare.
I think they're rare. And I think it's due to some of our personalities. And I do also think it's due to those 3 things being aligned as well. I think that's a big part of it, because I think if character wasn't, some of those other things wouldn't be as easy. I think also, like, as you mature, like, I think for most people, ego gets less. And so, where I would say, my ego is probably more likely to get in the way. But I think genuinely, I've, in the last several years, matured to where ultimately I think I do a pretty good job of trying to keep that in check. And in general, I really actually care more about what the end result is more than who does it. And that's just been a maturing on my part. But I think if there's ego in the way, I think that becomes a bigger issue. If there's like an irrational part of a disagreement whereas disagreement's better if it's like, hey, I believe this is best for the business, without any ego attached, and I believe this is best in this situation. I think that type of disagreement is easier to come by when there's not irrational personalities in the mix. But that's not always the case. I think that, one thing I've talked about a lot, and I believe everyone should have, and we both have, are separate mentors in our lives.
That's good.
Separate, things like coaches. And we actually don't have a board, but we've talked about having a board. And I think that that's something that I think that is also something that kind of helps give some objectivity to the business, especially when the business is big enough and a lot of people and other people's lives are involved, those kind of things. I just think that actually that's a smart thing to do. So I don't, outside input I think is key. I also, someone told me a long time ago that, and I think this is, an important thing too, is when you're in a business partnership, I do think it's important not to just like a marriage, right? Like you've got to work to keep other people's voices out of that too, and even really close ones. Like that's not, so like, we're both married. So like our wives have obviously big, like their decisions that we make affect them and they have input on that. But also at the same time, like you need to, I think you need to work to have a balance of that when you're in a business partnership, because I think other people's voices, however close or distant they may be, in the middle of that relationship, I think cause a lot of challenges too, or can cause a lot of challenges. And I had, I think long time ago, someone who I respected a lot in business had mentioned that particular aspect to me. And as just be careful, be aware of like not bringing, take guidance. That's not what I'm saying, but don't let people get in the middle of the relationship. Like you need to own the relationship basically, because it is with you.
Yeah. What would you guys say is, and we've talked about this throughout this hour, but I'd love to kind of boil it down. Like, what would you say as you look at other businesses, other partnerships, and Bob, I'd love to hear from you first, is what would you say you're most grateful for, or you're glad about, or you're like, this is how I'm really thankful that we do this and not this? Because you work with a lot of businesses and come in contact with probably a lot of business owners on a regular basis. Like, what's the one thing that you could say, this is really beneficial and this works for us?
Yeah, and maybe I can slightly reinterpret the question, if that's okay, about, I think what I see that's different about what we do is this, I think this partnership that we have, I think that is unique. And so I have been thinking a little bit about, since you invited me on the podcast, like what are the benefits? Like what are, we've talked a little bit about conflict, and actually just maybe one quick last thought on conflict is I think that, especially for people like me with maybe more my sort of personality makeup, I think one of the things that I've learned over the years is, if you decide to bottle something up, maybe that's not the right way to put it, but if you decide like you're just going to go with it, you can't hold on to it, because otherwise what happens is you quietly build up like frustrations, and then one day that comes out maybe in an emotional moment.
And Enneagram 9, when they blow up, it's not pretty.
Yeah, and that's really unfair. I mean, if you're able to step back, I mean, you can't in the moment, but if you're able to step back, that's really unfair because you've not communicated frustration over the period of time, and all of a sudden it's an 11, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, even when we talk about clients and in sales, if you're getting frustrated with somebody because maybe they're not doing what you want them to do, if you haven't communicated that, you forfeit the right to be mad at them. And so I think if you are going to let something go, you have to really let it go or address it. So you have to decide, is this something important that we need to talk about, or is it something I'm just going to let go? So I just wanted to share that because that's something I think I've learned pretty much the hard way.
That's great.
Yeah. And in terms of the benefits of partnership, if I can answer the question that way, and then feel free to ask a follow-up. But the two things that came to mind for me, and the two things that I share probably the most often, I think number one is, Ken was talking about the basketball team. I don't know basketball, so this is probably going to go south.
Soccer.
Is that there are going to be games when you're having, or days or games when you're having a bad game, or things are going against you. And I think one of the true huge benefits of a partnership is to have someone who can come alongside and be, come on, let's go. We can do this. They pick you up. They, lean down to you, give you a hand up. They can give you energy. They can inspire you. They can be like, we'll get through this together. We'll figure it out. So on those, whether it's a day or a season that you're going through in life that's hard, having someone who cares about you and whose interests and character and purpose are aligned with you to be able to help you through that. And then the flip side of that is then the real joy and pleasure you can get from helping the other person too on days when they're down, right?
Yeah.
To be able to, and sometimes being down looks different for different people, but just that, two are better than one, and you just have that balance at times when there's just like, oh man, this sucks, and be like, no, come on, we can do this. And then later the other person will be like, man, you don't know how much that just energized me. So
that's good.
That was number one.
I totally agree. That's good.
That's good.
And then number two is, for me, is I think how when you have the right partner, how it impacts you personally and how you grow and change over time. And I think that, like I mentioned, maybe in the first part of our partnership, it might have been more about, I really admire, Ken's skill and his talent, and, he's a great guy, to being challenged on how I think about things, how I do things, what's important in my life, thinking about how I treat people, thinking about how I react to situations. So I think that I can say, unequivocally that I am a much better person.
It's a big word you use there.
I didn't quite get it out, but it was close. I'm a much better person because of Ken, in so many ways. And look, I think we're both even drinking Bulletproof coffee this morning.
Yes. Everyone
You would have
should.
never even known about Bulletproof.
Yeah. So, no, but just I think, being challenged to push, I think personal development, wasn't really something that I thought about or pursued really until some of the conversations I've had with Ken, and then just seeing him also really evolve and grow in so many areas and change, and being inspired by that and challenged by that too. I think that has made me a much better person.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
That's very cool of you to say. I would say the exact same thing. Yeah, those are good. Was that number two? Or was
that was number two? Yeah, number one is just.
Did you say two things or four things?
I said two.
Oh, I thought you said four. Okay, I was waiting for the next two.
No, that's awesome.
Those are great. That's really good. I like it.
Guys, thank you so much, and Bob, thank you for coming and spending the time. And we're going to do it again soon, and not let.
Yeah, we swapped Brad for Bob, just as a little sub, but maybe you can join a little bit more.
Yeah, because here. I know you have a lot to say about kind of the pieces of that you manage here in Metacake, of client relationships and managing projects. And
I don't even know if we talked about your role, but that's most of what Bob's doing is, I think that all the stuff that you mentioned at the beginning, but that led you to where you are. So your curiosity and your experience inside of, a really rare experience inside of giant global corporations, helping them solve giant problems at a very early age, is sort of the spark or the nugget that kind of has made up, a lot of what you contribute to businesses every day, which is huge. So it's not really, we talk about, a lot of agencies are worry about sales, and I think it's less about sales and it's more about, and you say this all the time, about what you do, which is really just helping people, add value with every conversation and help them make a decision, right? And so you need to be intelligent enough and have enough experience to do that. That's what you do every day. So maybe we can dig into that in another podcast, a little bit more about that.
I have no interest in sales at all. That just totally drains energy from me, right. The thought of sales.
But you like helping people.
But what I get energy from is helping people.
That's great.
Bob,
that's a great partner.
Bob would help almost everyone for free if it wasn't for me.
Yeah. Thanks, Ken.
I'm just kidding.
True story.
That's great.
That's good.
That's great. Okay, guys. Well, thanks. Go out and have an awesome day. Bob, help a lot of people today.
I will.
Yeah. Talk to you guys soon.
See ya.
Bye.